AI ops, MLOps, DevOps. It's all Greek to me. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. It's Alan Schimmel here for Techstrong Gang. Hope you've had a great weekend and you're ready to get back to work this morning. There's a lot going on in the world. We're going to try to just cover just three things. That's what we do here on Techstrong Gang. We just do three things every day. Got a great gang of cast of gang members to go over stuff with. Let me quickly introduce you to them. First of all, the lady from New Mexico. She's the CEO of Deploy Hub, open source expert extraordinaire, and one of our favorite people here at Techstrong World, Tracy Ragan. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
Hey, Alan, thank you. Thank you for that. I like being a favorite person.
Well, you are. Thank you. Joining Tracy, he is in the streets of New York City, Manhattan even. He is Visible Impact Chief Analyst, Guy Currier. Hey, Guy, I hope I got that right for you.
You got it right. Thank you.
Just wanted to clarify.
It's great to be here again.
You're not in New Jersey.
What exit?
What exit? That's right.
I'm staying in New Jersey with my nephew, but I'm coming into Manhattan every day because
not near exit 13, Elizabeth, Newark.
No, right by the bridge, right by Fort Lee.
Oh, okay. You're up by the GW and the Henry Hudson.
You know, we came up with congestion pricing to keep you people on that side of the bridge, but no.
I love when you use you people.
And that's why I take the bus.
That's you people. All right, let's move over from you people. We'll stay in New York. We'll go up to Harrison. Looking mighty reddish pinkish today. Our own Mike Bizarre.
I'm actually just back from a run, so there you go.
All right, good for you. I did a bike ride this morning myself. It was cold. Well, it's all relative, but it was cold down here today. It was probably in the 60s. I was freezing. Moving there, I'm sure it's at least in the 60s up in the high mountains of Colorado. No one commented on that. It's our Futurum VP analyst for DevOps, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitch, how are you? You're on mute. Oh, now you're
doing
not.
Great. Always doing great. Good to see the gang. Good to be on the gang again.
All righty. All right, let's jump into it this fine Monday. Mike, we had some Techstrong AI coverage on JFrog's. I think you were at a JFrog event in New York last week, weren't you?
Yeah, they had an event down in Rockefeller Center, and they had about 200 people show up for the launch of a JFrog MLOps platform, which is based on code they got from a startup that they acquired last year and now are productizing, and it's much more integrated with their core DevOps platform. They gave out these lovely mugs here, and I got to say, it took me about 15 minutes to figure out how this thing actually works. But what it does...
Is that the one that heats it up?
Yeah, and it continuously stirs it.
Yes, I have one of those.
Which is, of course, core to DevOps. We're continuously stirring things. So I want to thank JFrog for yet another first world platform issue solved.
I was going to say, what are you putting in there? You need to have a continuous.
Well, that's my problem. Is I'm not a coffee drinker, and it's still sitting in the box. I've had it a while.
I think it's.
So what was it you said in the intro? What was it you said in the intro, Alan? MLOps, AI ops, DevOps, and now we have coffee ops.
And now we have coffee ops. It's all ops. It's new ops, no ops.
But what was really interesting about it is that the folks who came to this event were largely data science types, and they all work with these MLOps platform. And JFrog's making a case, and a hard one. Every speaker got up, said, if those folks want people to use their AI models, they have to be integrated with the existing DevOps workflows, or the developers are never going to find them. And what I was trying to puzzle out in my mind, and I'll start with Tracy on this, is there kind of a divide between these data science teams that are using these MLOps platforms and the rest of the DevOps teams, and each of them has like a different culture, and we need to bridge that?
I'm not sure. It's a different culture. I think that the MLOps community have been somewhat underserved when it comes to DevOps. The reason why I love this, the reason why I totally love what's happening here is that we're finally stopping to think about MLOps and AI and the components that we use, like models and data sets. They're just components. They need the same kind of management as any other kind of component. So when we think of artifact management, in Artifactory, we often think of just binaries. That's kind of where our brain goes. It's artifacts of binary, but artifact can be anything. So being able to start to bring in the AI components, models, data sets, as well as binaries into a central place and treat it just like any other DevOps, any other type of component pushed through the DevOps pipeline is going to be a time saver, and it's going to offer a lot of clarity to those data scientists who may not have had that kind of products in the past. Now, I understand we have things like TensorFlow that help them build these models, but when it comes to all the other pieces of the DevOps pipeline, the MLOps teams have not had the luxury of these kinds of tools. So imagine how hard it is to try to manage just a deployment of one of those without a DevOps engine. I, as a DevOps person, can't imagine doing it. So, I saw last year, I think, is when JFrog bought Quack. It's been almost a year now. So they've taken some time to really, it looks like to me, to kind of sort out how to integrate the MLOps components into their process. But it's time. I don't know if we're too late on the MLOps question, because I know people are still doing it, but it doesn't feel like it's as popular as it once was. But for the data scientists, this is what they need. So yay, JFrog, that they're actually servicing that community from a DevOps perspective, because it's the problems are all the same. It's just a different component.
Mike, there are differences in how the teams work, and I think that's great to see JFrog taking that on through their acquisition of Quack. Software has its own iterative process, as ML and MLOps also has its own kind of development workflow, which isn't exactly the way software is created. Usually in machine learning type of applications, you have a data engineer, data analyst, you'll have a developer, usually a domain expert that's helping you, and you iterate on the model, you iterate on the format and the structure of the data that the model uses and the algorithms use, and you go through this iterative process where you create what they call features. This is like, okay, this is what it can answer for this kind of a question, or this kind of analysis, or this type of data that it's going to analyze and produce some predictable results. That iterative process, where is it released at? It's sort of kind of, when is the software ready? Same thing happens in MLOps. When is the model ready? And eventually those two things have to join, the kind of traditional software and the machine learning language, algorithms and models. So it's good to see JFrog take that on. I don't think it's just a matter of let's put our stuff in our artifacts. I think it's also the workflow. So I'm curious to see how this is going to be adopted. And I wish JFrog the best at this, because I think it's important for us to figure this out so we don't have this kind of chocolate peanut butter impedance mismatch between the two approaches to developing what we're creating.
Yeah, and I think that the model training is where pulling the data sets and training the models and then storing them is where the MLOps workflow is the most important. But centralizing that into a kind of a central platform will make things easier in the long run.
Just making it part of the DevOps workflow is a win
exactly.
right there, or vice versa. DevOps part of the ML workflow.
I actually think also the experiment tracking and hyperparameter management, these are really important elements of what the data scientist does. And having, agile workflow for that sort of thing is really helpful as well. I like the bridge here, like everyone's noted, the bridge out to the data scientists and the data scientists' particular types of work that really differ significantly from the coder, and yet still bringing them into this DevOps-like paradigm.
Hey, Alan, we saw an outfit called a couple of weeks back, Data Robot bought some distributed computing platform startup. And I wonder if we're about to see some major convergence here. Will all the DevOps companies kind of go after MLOps companies, and will the MLOps people start acquiring DevOps companies? And, are these two trains going to collide?
I don't know if they're going to collide, but sometimes things seem too forced. Too forced. I get why you would want the MLOps to help in developing, deploying AI apps, training LLMs. Not everything has to be part of my DevOps workflow. And I just, I remember when they bought Quack, I was at Swamp Up. I think I had a chance to meet the founder, one of the co-founders of Quack, actually, I interviewed. I smell what they're cooking. I just don't know if we're eating it, or if it's on my food pyramid.
I would argue that this conversation we've been having about platform engineering for a while will force this issue, and that people are going to start centralizing the management of application development, and they will naturally view those AI models as an extension of that conversation. So I think it may happen.
Well, to Alan's point, if we look at DBAs have never embraced the DevOps pipeline, right? They have their own process, and they've never, ever really decided that was a good idea, DevOps.
Well, there is this kind of tiering, it literally is called tiering of applications, the old monolithic model, and the data and the data services are and can be seen as a sort of a separate layer or tier. But Alan, I don't think, and Tracy, I guess, I think, I'm a fan of saying there's no such thing as an AI application. What there are AI services that get exposed or injected into other applications. And as such, AI has become just so pervasive that what I would think the problem JFrog is solving for is all the developers using DevOps and wanting to do more and more of it now need to incorporate AI. And those AI services, if they're being developed, tuned, or RAG based or whatever it is, there's a data scientist involved, and that's, I think, a little bit more of an opportunity. Let's not call it a problem; it's an opportunity compared to what I completely agree with Tracy's statement about how the DBAs have never really wedded with DevOps very well. But I think this is different because of how infused and integrated AI is in every application. It's going the other direction, right? It's not being pushed out from AI. It's being pulled in from the development.
Well, this has a unique characteristic that you're pushing not just algorithms, machine learning algorithms, you're pushing data with it, right? The model includes data. So it is kind of incongruent with what we think about a normal DevOps workflow of pushing software, right? Usually not pushing a lot of data through the process, which is also to your point, Tracy, about why data and database engineers, analysts haven't been kind of part of that DevOps workflow, right? It has its own flow, its own process. And I think that's the key to this is, Alan, it's not just about does JFrog bolt on AI or MLOps into their products. That is not going to solve the problem. You're not going to attract people. It's like saying, I have open APIs. As long as you use my APIs, they're open, right? No, it's like you have to adapt to the workflow and intersect those workflows in the way that it makes sense. I don't think we know enough about that yet, or have experimented enough to really, truly know what the right approach is. So hopefully we have some folks that make some progress in that area.
Well, I hope that we continue just thinking about parts are parts, right? And obviously different parts have different requirements around them, and there may be different workflows for different parts, but it's still a component. It still has to do we still have to think about how to add testing and vulnerability scanning. It's a part that has to go through the software factory floor, and the DevOps engine is the best place to do that. And these are developers, even though we have new terms like data scientists, they're still developers, and they're still part of the development community. And to embrace them and provide them tools that allow them to support the DevOps pipeline is the direction we should go with this, because we all know it helps things move faster, and we always want to go faster.
Yeah. I would say, we talked about this in a previous show, but the DBAs are going to get rolled up theoretically into this platform engineering motion as well. So, maybe we're coming for the data scientists, the DBAs, and their little dogs too. I don't know.
Well, when they come for the data scientists, we didn't say anything. That's a different thing. But let me just tell you that there is one more chip here that JFrog has in their pocket to play. And that is, they've announced a partnership with NVIDIA. And this MLOps platform and flow is supposed to be integrated into the NVIDIA, what's the NVIDIA
NIM,
software?
it's NIM is the framework.
NIM,
Yeah,
I actually
NIM,
learned
yeah.
what it stands for. It's NVIDIA Inference Microservices. NIM. Who knew?
There you go.
Yeah, it's a tool set for deploying AI into containerized environments.
Yeah.
And Hugging Face also, Alan, that's really significant. Hugging Face is a quasi standard now
Yes.
for model development and benchmarking of systems for ML and AI.
Yeah, and
Agreed.
it's just like going out and pulling a package down, an open source package. We're pulling down an open source LLM, treating it like a component, and then starting to track the changes in it.
Right.
Right?
And
This
then-
it's basic to what we've always done.
and
Agreed.
not to be left out, but they brought in Databricks and they got an outfit called Bowplan, which makes some sort of serverless data lake. So they got it.
And SageMaker,
Look,
AWS SageMaker is part of their
JFrog's
announcement
doing
too.
we spoke yesterday about playing checkers versus three-dimensional chess. JFrog definitely is playing three-dimensional chess in this market with that, right? And you look at, who their traditional competitors are in the DevOps, DevSecOps platform. You look at GitHub, GitLab, CloudBeast, Harness, and you see, Harness is making some moves along in this space as well. Not sure if the others are yet. But anyway, I'll leave that to the analyst to comment on. I'm just, well, I don't know what I am. But let's take a break here on Techstrong Gang. We'll come back and we'll talk about our next block.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back and the gang's going to talk about this new AI agentic offering that goes on top of a platform called Open Rewrite that was created by Modern. And what they've done is made it more accessible to a broader number of folks because it's at the core of a lot of the application modernization efforts that people have, aka I'm going to upgrade from Java single digit number, pick your favorite double digit number, and you can use this tool to automate a lot of that workflow. It doesn't do it all entirely, but it might take something that might have taken you, I don't know, a year and a half to cut it down to maybe 6 months. And now they're putting some AI agents in front of that. Mitch, I guess, when I looked at this, I was wondering if the cost of switching from different platforms is about to drop and maybe people won't be as locked in as they used to be because it won't take as much time to migrate.
Well, think about migration in a couple ways or modernization in a couple ways. One is, to your point about upgrading versions of Java, right? Some of those changes are no small attempt. I mean, it's a big effort to go between different versions of, say, between Python 2 and 3. It was a big deal, right? Things are different in those languages. So it takes more than just syntax changes and new features that are in the language. When we talk about converting COBOL to something else, right, to Python or C or whatever it might be, now you're talking about architecturally some really big differences between how that application and all of its different programs, code were put together and how you would build that, whether it's in a monolith or semi-monolith or more microservice oriented. So we're talking about, baby steps here. We're not throwing COBOL systems at it and say, great, it's all done, we're all good. But I think to the point is they've taken what they've created so far and now put this into this lossless tree structure that has kind of more semantic richness about understanding the interdependencies between code and analyzing different code bases. I'm not sure all the things that it does. Sounds pretty interesting. I'd like to learn more about it. But this is something that they've also open sourced as well as built into their product. I think the important thing, really interesting thing, is the agent part of it, is sending that off to do specific tasks around analyzing multiple code bases, doing some rewrites, finding issues that can be addressed. And again, this is a stair-step process of maturity of what it can do agentically versus guided versus it still takes a human.
Mhm.
It takes us
Go ahead.
takes us back to that conversation of mono versus poly repos and the problems that they do create. But when you're in a decoupled architecture, in particular, microservices, we used that word the last block. We know that when one application is going to be an aggregation of several repos. It's not just one application does not have one repo. So tools like this makes it a lot easier to say, I need to aggregate, I need to scan all of these because this is one application, right? And this isn't just a problem here. It's a problem in other ways as well. So I think taking on that polyrepo problem for doing rewrites and, updating your code is a super useful thing to use.
Mhm. I will tell you, they were a little miffed because all these companies are out there claiming that they have upgraded something using AI tools. And they were like, the truth of the matter is, yeah, they pointed their AI tool, but they used our repository to do it. And so most of the work was done on the repository side from them and not by the AI agent, according to them at least. And they feel like some folks are taking too much credit for things that their open source platform actually does.
I have a hard time believing that because tell me what code base, what repository, especially one that's been around for a long time, is that organized, that cleaned up, that easy to work with. Those things they're like wiring closets, for your network in your office. As soon as you close the door, it's a mess the next time you open it. So I wouldn't put as much stock into that. Maybe they're getting some advantages, of course, of what's there, but there's a lot of work to go from point A to point B on this.
I don't know. I kind of want to challenge you on this, Mitch, because I kind of feel like that's one of these things that generative AI does so well, is masses of seemingly disorganized data and information. And I mean, it's not a pattern detection tool exactly, but through that iterative, training process, it finds plausible further strings of data based on input strings of data, and this is far beyond what the human mind right now can do. So, like, isn't it sort of like I don't know, a new weapon to deploy against what everybody has put together in a disorganized fashion and therefore can't use in the same way?
It's kind of there's a pony in there syndrome, right? Well, like, what does all this stuff do? And if I'm going to modernize it or migrate it or re-platform it, whatever it is, what do I have and what do I need to modernize? What can I leave behind? I don't want to leave things behind that need to be there. So generative AI, and there's a lot of different products that are doing this now, are really good or getting better, let's put it that way, at analyzing code bases and first telling you functionally what the requirements or what this software does. Second is the architecture of it, describing of it, how it is organized or disorganized to whatever degree it is. So then you can make some decisions the human can about, well, then how am I going to re-architect this? How do I move forward with this? And maybe I use AI to do some of the development, with it. Maybe I don't. But to your point, Guy, it's an extremely useful tool. I think it's going to be even more useful over time as it gets better and better.
Let me give you a use case that we talked about, and this will become readily apparent to all of you, I think. So vendor A decides that it wants to raise licensing fees for its platforms. We've seen a lot of that lately. And they pick a price point for that hike that's just kind of right below the cost of moving off that platform, so people suck it up. But imagine it didn't cost as much to move off that platform, and then maybe vendor A that rose prices miscalculated and more people will migrate away to something else, which we're seeing a lot of people trying to at least experiment with.
So any specific vendor you have in mind there, Mike?
This is like all the characters in this are fictional and don't, if they may resemble some real.
We've changed the names to protect the guilty.
Boy, you're a little transparent there, Mike.
Yeah.
Hi, Joe
And the thing
Friday
is,
here. Dragnet.
We have always done this. I mean, we're talking about this like it's a brand new tool. But come on, we've had COBOL to C, C to Java. We've done this for quite a long time. We've had these converters. Maybe AI makes it better. I'm hoping it does, because I've used some of those conversion tools. You go from C to Java, and it gives you a baseline, but there's a lot of work yet to do. So I'm hoping that it does a better job of what we used to have in the past.
I hope so.
Yeah.
From a VC point of view, right? That typical VC looking at how it looks at the world, there's a big opportunity. There's a big market, right? There's a lot of legacy applications that are going to have to be converted to a cloud native architecture over the next 3 years, 5 years. I was reading, I think 85% of greenfield new applications will, maybe even more, will be cloud native architected from scratch. But you've literally got millions and billions of existing applications that need to be converted, that need to be modernized is the word.
But to Tracy's point, the way it's been done historically has been, people went out and they hired some global SI to come in, and they said they would do this project for them. And then the bus shows up and about 30 kids roll off and they move in for a year and a half, and then they never actually finish the gig. So I'm hoping that this gets better to enable what you just described.
But I think a better analogy is moving from private data center to cloud, right? What we see, that first wave was just lift and shift, right? And it's only now, 20 years later, 15 years, 20 years later, that we're seeing real cloud migration that maybe even not, some of it's cloud native, but even the ones that are not cloud native, really taking advantage of a cloud architecture versus just lift and shift off the on-prem data center or the closet.
Well, we're living this in another kind of parallel universe, and that's not called modernization, but it's called development using AI tools, whether you talk about Cursor or Claude code that just came out using Sonnet 3.7. We're in an era now where we're interactively saying, analyze the code. Doesn't have to be COBOL from 30 years ago or 40 years ago. It's my code I just wrote, or I picked up in this new job, or part of a code I haven't worked with before. Maybe I know it really well. But we have AI now analyzing existing code bases and making changes to it, recommending changes, agentically making changes in some cases with Claude code. So it's on a spectrum now. It isn't just moving the old stuff to something new. It's taking what we have and using AI to continue to develop it.
I think we need Mel Gibson from Braveheart just screaming freedom, and then everybody will get going.
Yeah, it didn't end well for him.
I think we got enough people doing that in the country, Mike. Take it easy.
But to Alan's
Doesn't work
point,
so
I
well.
think the taking the monolithic and breaking it up into decoupled components and features is probably the biggest challenge companies have, and these kinds of tools can do that better. At least again, like I said, it's not perfect; it's a baseline, but to be able to break it up can be really challenging. And so, if we're using AI to make modernizing our monolithic into decoupled architecture that we could take advantage of all the cloud native features we've been talking about for the last, 7-8 years. It's probably about time we have a tool like this, and that will help a lot of companies move into that direction.
Fair enough.
Here's what I find interesting. So you described earlier, Tracy, the sort of the old way up until last year, or still going on now, which is like originally just all this manual we're talking 30 years ago or whatever, and only for those applications where you really needed to do some kind of translation and experience and logging, and then starting to post these things. Here's how you do it. And then automated tools, like you say, started to appear. These were not AI based. And all this work has gone in, and it's such that we now have an open source community. How to, it's like this to that.com, how to glue this to that, right? This is now like how to move from this code base to that code base. And then here comes Modern and says, hey, thanks for all the work. We just trained an AI on this, and you can pay to do all of this so much faster. That's the story that sort of popped out at me is, thanks for all the work over the decades, guys. We now have an AI trained to do it.
But isn't that the AI way?
That is the AI way. And I completely agree about the usefulness of this. It's wonderful. It's terrific. It's an interesting example of something that's not me, by the way. I have the horns. Someone else.
No, Mitchell has the dog sound effects.
So it's something you were sort of talking about, Alan. We've been talking about a little bit is open source under threat.
Mhm.
Is it under threat? Because now we have all of this community work over decades in all these different areas, and AI is trained, and then we're going to put more human data in, and then maybe we're going to we'll use synthetic data already. And at what point does it become this recursive circle that's training itself and going off, I don't know, the edge of the
Isn't there
world?
a tipping point, Guy? Is we generate so much more code using AI or modify it. At some point, you have to have AI to be able to manage it. You have so much code, you can't hire humans to do all the work on it. You have to be able to kind of re-ingest it, modify it, change it, whatever it is. So we're kind of creating this world where it is inevitable that you have to have AI if you're going to be generating this amount of code this fast.
I think
I think so.
if you ever saw the bill from a global SI on one of these projects, you will lose your sympathy quickly.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in one of those buses that pulled up outside early in my career.
Yep. All right, let's take a break here on the gang. We're going to come back and discuss C Block. HashiCorp's part of IBM. Is it a kinder, gentler Hashi? You're watching Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey folks, we're back, and as Alan alluded to, yes, HashiCorp is now finally formally part of IBM. I think it operates semi-independently, but the issue becomes, well, where does HashiCorp fit in with the rest of IBM, including Red Hat and Apptio? And they have some ambitions in that space. But Guy, you've been following this for a little while, talked to a lot of the folks at HashiCorp over the years. What's your take on all this? Where do you think it all winds up?
Well, I think what's really interesting here is so IBM, right? We're the original gangster of computer systems that transformed itself through software delivery to now essentially a services firm for building and deploying and acquiring and managing enterprise software and other types of software. Where the acquisition of Red Hat seemed to start this latest phase of enabling organizations owning and running off the shelf, as well as building and deploying their own applications on various platforms, puts IBM in a pretty strong position, both in the public and the private sector. So where does HashiCorp fit into this? I mean, most famous product, Terraform, infrastructure as code. Ways to tighten the integration and responsiveness back and forth between the code, the software, whether off the shelf or developed, and the infrastructure. I don't think it necessarily means we're bringing Terraform to Z systems or anything like that. Z systems being the big mainframes that IBM has, but maybe it does. Maybe it does. And this sort of general enablement of IBM in the enterprise and in the public sector, which are the two big areas where IBM plays, of DevOps, has been, I think, a maybe surprising force of good in the industry. Red Hat remains independent. We can expect HashiCorp itself to remain independent. Apptio's remain independent, as brands with their own go-to-market, their own user bases and so forth. While the mainline IBM product lines or service lines really get to incorporate and use and influence development of all of these. They all have a part to play in application development, production, and delivery to user bases for the business or the agency goal. The only other thing I'd add is that HashiCorp in particular has a really robust set of tools around automating and running and maintaining service health of all kinds of infrastructure. And that helps broaden IBM's ability to also be an additional player as opposed to a single source. They've had this sort of single source model forever. They take on the entire application. And by the way, when you talk about off-the-shelf enterprise applications, every off-the-shelf enterprise application has all kinds of customized and own code in the enterprise or in the institution that adapts that enterprise software to the particular needs and uses of the organization. There's lots for IBM to do there, even if they are, secondary vendor or secondary player to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mitch,
go ahead.
hold on. Mitch, they were describing it somewhat like this, where Terraform is kind of like day zero, and Ansible is day two management of the environment, and those will be those different automations. And I'm not quite clear if that makes sense or how much overlap there is between Terraform and Ansible as we kind of go forward. And frankly, in the age of AI, I'm wondering, are those just all going to wind up being back-end services that some AI agent is going to deliver, and they all just kind of fade away in the background?
I think of it as just platforms that are automated, right? Processes for provisioning, updating, configurations, configuration management of that. You have to remember you have a huge embedded base of Terraform users, open source and HashiCorp. So open tofu kind of folks. But of course also Ansible, it's been one of the earliest, that and Chef, been around a long time. So Puppet. Yes, thanks. Exactly. So I don't think you can say this is day zero and this is day one and this is day two. People use these tools across both the operational and development life cycles. They use them to create development environments. They use them to create test environments. They use them in production. So, what the blending of all that will look like, maybe they stay somewhat separate since they're in different business units. Maybe they all benefit from Watson AI. That becomes a feature, part of these technologies as part of the AI strategies take place, but we'll see.
Can I be a bit of a jerk, Mitch, and say that Ansible is the Linux cloud native URL sort of religion, quote unquote, whereas Terraform is a lot more the enterprise religion?
Enterprise.
We use both. I mean, to me, they're completely separate tools.
Yeah.
I see Ansible as a
overlap.
configuration. Yeah. Ansible is, that is a full-on DevOps tool. Terraform is a platform engineering tool,
That's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, and I get using both because you have to go and stand up an environment before you can deploy to it.
But guys, I want to take off the rose-colored glasses here for a second. If you think Red Hat, Apptio, name other IBM acquisitions, exist as quasi-independent companies and have not been assimilated into Big Blue. I've got a bridge for you, guy. There's one right out the window there. Okay, this ain't Red Hat pre-IBM. But
Well, no. I referred to the brands remaining independent.
yeah,
They
there's
have
brands
independent
out there
sales teams,
because
independent marketing teams. They're allowed to go and continue to
yeah.
develop their
I
own
mean, because
customers and
it
so
goes
forth.
to the heart of what is IBM today, right? They spun off Kyndryl, right? But IBM itself still remains a consulting firm. And now, and they always prided themselves on being able to, and Kyndryl still does, we'll help you deploy whatever the right tool for your job is. But now they have some favored tools. They have Red Hat. They've got Apptio. Now they've got Hashi. And so the IBM consulting team, those are their favored tools, I'm going to assume. The underlying, the brands Red Hat, and I assume it'll be Hashi and Apptio, they're still selling those products, but in a perfect IBM world, those products are wrapped around some sort of version of the IBM cloud, some sort of version of Watson X or Granite or whatever the IBM AI is going to be, but it's all wrapped around IBM services, right? Because that's still the mothership here. And
it supports greatly the IBM services offering. You use the word consulting. Kyndryl is the consulting arm that got spun off.
Yes.
I think of IBM when I said
Kyndryl's
services.
global services.
That's not entirely correct. Kyndryl is a services company that does managed services and a lot of maintenance work, but
Kyndryl's
IBM
the old
Consulting
IBM
still
global
exists
services.
within IBM, and that's still a huge driver.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, Hashi. Let's remember how Hashi got into this mess. Right? And look, Michio Hashimoto did an amazing job with Hashimoto. He started that company, I think he was 18 years old. And he built, there are 2 or 3, Terraform is probably in and of itself a multi-billion-dollar product. And then don't forget Vault and secrets management and all that good stuff is big. And there's a third, and I'm not remembering it right now.
It was a service mesh console.
Yes. And they changed their open source licensing, and there was a big pushback in the community, right? That was quite a row over at KubeCon 2 years ago or whatever it was. And then IBM, I think, picked them up at a great price at $6.4 billion. If, $1 billion here, $1 billion there, that's a big deal. But at 6.4 was a great pickup. They've got 3 great products. I think the issue is going to be how well they integrate into Red Hat, how well IBM services wraps around these things, how well they work with Ansible or in the FinOps or the rest of the IBM security. IBM security is still a major player in the game, right? Man, they got Vault to play with, to lead with now. That's going to be a big tip of the spear for them as well. So I think overall, I always thought this was a great deal for IBM. It was a great outcome for Mitchell. I think HashiCorp could have gone on to do bigger and better things, perhaps independent. I think we'll have to see how the big bluing of HashiCorp, talk to me in 2 or 3 years. If you have brain drain, if you have continued development of product, if you have continued integration. That's my take.
If you want me to be equally pessimistic about, well, you're not really being pessimistic.
No, I'm not.
Less rosy about it. I do think you have a point because IBM acquires these companies and they start to turn more towards details.
Right.
Really important and helpful and valuable details as opposed to pushing envelopes or innovation. And that's just a different business model and a necessary one. And I want to emphasize that I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think standing up
No, it's
boldly and doing
IBM.
incredible, what new things no one has done before is as much as it's
Hey, there's a reason
cracked
they're
to be.
around. Guy, there's a reason they're around 100 plus years, right? This is what they do. Now, is Red Hat the daring darling of the Linux open source world that it was 7 years ago? Probably not.
So I have a question for Mitch. Will IBM open source Terraform under some sort of consortium play, and maybe much the way that Red Hat has been adding more things to the consortium later, and then will that bring Open Tofu and Terraform back together, or is Open Tofu off on its own and maybe will gain momentum because there's a lot of folks out there that aren't in love with IBM and Red Hat?
I don't think
Well,
Open Tofu is going anywhere. I
No,
think
it's
it's going
part
to
of
stay right there.
CNCF.
Yeah.
and they're not
Yeah.
going to open source. Sorry, they're not going to open source any of their products. They're going to leave them as is. What I've
Oh,
seen about
wait, Mitch. Let's there's what's the word I'm looking here? There's nuances here.
Yes, there is an open
Terraform-
source version of Terraform.
Terraform was open source. They
Yeah, no.
changed the license a little
But
bit.
why would they go back and open
I don't
source?
think they'll go
motivation
back to
do
an
that.
OSI
Yeah.
license.
I mean, you step back and look at all the things we're talking about, whether it's Red Hat or Ansible or Terraform, Vault, all of these things have been around for a while, at least 10 years, if not more, when you go back to Red Hat. And so what is IBM acquiring? Yes, they're acquiring product companies. No, they're acquiring customer bases that use all these products, right, that they can serve, right? They're not buying it just to sell a lot more product. They're buying it because they're getting massive customer bases from this. It's huge. Ansible has been around for a long time. There are a lot of people that use it. Same for Terraform. So, you talk about the consulting services and the kind of what got spun off with Kyndryl. IBM is still an operations infrastructure process kind of company. That's what they serve really well. That's what their bread and butter has been for a long time since they shifted out of just doing mainframes. You can argue mainframes were infrastructure too.
Well,
So
don't add application management. I just want to put in a
no,
good word for that.
that's part of it. It's not. We're not talking about IBM's buying Cursor. We're talking about IBM buying staples that have been out in the industry for a while.
That's what I mean.
Because
They got some red letter brands here with Hashi. They got
for
$3
sure.
billion
They're great
businesses.
companies. I'm not disparaging them at all. I'm just saying they're not on the bleeding edge of acquisitions. Let's be frank.
But and also to the point on the open source, hey, Red Hat changed Rails license too, and a lot of people pushed back.
Oh yeah. But they're still around.
And they're still around. I do not see IBM going back on the licensing change. I think Open Tofu's doing just fine under CNCF. And whatever your cup of tea is, your cup of tea is. But
And
Mitch,
as we've all been, we've been saying that this has been, so these tools are pretty, don't want to call them old, but respectively, they are
stable,
old.
mature tools.
They're mature.
And
Mitch-
many of their competitors, we don't even talk about anymore. Puppet and Chef, those tools have, they're slowly being replaced by other tools. And I think what we should be looking at is if IBM has, Terraform and Ansible together and some of these other tools, isn't this a way for them to start looking at how to put some money behind this space in terms of AI, right? They basically own now that there aren't too many other tools that we've talked about in this space. Terraform and Open Tofu kind of are it. I mean, Pulumi has some stuff out there. Crossplane got a lot of attention for quite some time. I don't see those very, very often anymore. I see Terraform and Open Tofu being the two that are most competitive with each other. So I think that there's a bigger play that we may not be seeing that IBM sees. And how do we disrupt both this configuration management and IAC, these platforms?
And
to your point, Tracy, I think the reason why we talk about Ansible is because Red Hat bought them. Otherwise, we would talk about
because if it was Progress or
Exactly.
who bought Puppet, the people in Minneapolis,
Perforce.
The testing
Perforce.
company,
Perforce.
Perforce.
or right, and you see where those are. But let me just add one other thing and why bullish on IBM. They do have the AI. Don't underestimate the work they've done with Watson all these years.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And don't underestimate what they've come, there's this Granite thing. Actually, Futurum is the Ryan Shroud over at Signal 65 Labs has done some work on Granite. I think the report is available. We're going to feature, I interviewed Ryan on Techstrong TV. I think it's out today.
It's a great paper. Definitely.
Don't discount their quantum work too. Which
And
is
they're quite right.
really
Well,
advanced.
quantum's a whole look. All of a sudden, guys, I don't know.
No, that's a service to expose. Just like we're talking about.
No,
AI.
but in the
That's
last 2-3 weeks, we're seeing quantum sneakingly becoming real before our eyes. I actually
Can I give you?
that's why I mentioned it. Yeah, exactly.
Can I give you a nice word for old, just so you have it in the future? It's called venerable, as in mainframes are venerable. So then you
well,
don't have.
Thank you from the Dean of Harrison. That's your word for today, folks.
You must have gone to
Venerable.
college or something. Did you get that word?
Spell
in
that
college?
venerable.
And I want everybody to acknowledge that Alan has said that we might be on that quantum might be here sooner than 10 to 15 years, which was another conversation we had. And I was like, but we might be here.
No, so now I'm seeing maybe 2028. I actually copied off of LinkedIn. Someone posted a quantum ecosystem with all the logos for it. I'm thinking
This is not a quantum discussion, but Tracy, I think it's next year. I don't think it's 28. I think it's next year.
So
I think it's going to be faster
Mike,
than we
I
think,
want to
too.
do techstrongquantum.com. Something
Sure, why
like
not?
that.
It's time. It's time.
Just give me an
But
API,
just not-
and we're good to go.
Just going back to this conversation, I want to point out that any of these tools that are infrastructure as code, what other kinds of tool, even Ansible, GitOps, they are in a position to be disrupted at this point with AI, all of these tools. So we should be looking at what that disruption looks like. We should be looking for it and looking forward to it because it is time. And this is the case for, Helm charts, the Docker files, Jenkins workflow files, all of these types of
All of
scripts that
them
we've been
are
relying on.
Not venerable, vulnerable.
They are vulnerable for disruption, and the disruption's needed. It's time.
Here.
Go check out Cloud Code if you want to talk about disruption. I think that's
All right,
get off from there.
guys, I got to rein this in. What a great discussion. Tracy, I think you're dead on, by the way. That might have been one of the best closings we've ever had on Techstrong Gang. Mike, would you say that was venerable?
I would say you're venerable. So there you
I'm
go.
venerable. Aged like fine wine. All
I
right.
think we all are.
Hey,
That was a tough one.
we've got
vulnerable. I feel vulnerable. I'll take
Mitchell and I wanted to do a commercial like that when we did Still Secure. It was supposed to be like, are you feeling vulnerable? Have you been intruded upon? Come to Still Secure. Anyway.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, I lost my train. But hey, we've got Techstrong TV coming up after this. Stay tuned for the rest of our day's programming. Tracy, Mitch, Guy, Mike, thanks for joining in. Thank you for watching. This is Alan Schimmel. We're out.